At this point, every information portal is saturated with mindfulness content. But this show is a unique, unusual, curious take on mindfulness. Some of what you hear will be completely new to you. Let's dive in and take a look at the nature of the aware mind. I invite you to deepen your awareness so that you may be liberated and inspired. I'm Sarah Vallely, professional coach. I help people overcome anxiety, heal from past trauma, improve their relationships, and maintain better work-life balance. I'm really excited to have Stacey Curnow here with us today on the show. She is a licensed therapist and has a private practice here in Asheville, and she specializes in couples and families. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
You're welcome. Today, we are talking about de-escalating during conflict with your partner mostly. And conflict in a relationship can arise for a variety of reasons. The two people might have different beliefs about how things should be done. Someone's feelings might get hurt. They might not feel supported. They might feel like they've been devalued. Other family members, kind of navigating how much are other family members involved in the day-to-day lives and in the relationship. Not feeling heard, feeling misunderstood. Retriggered trauma, for example. You may have trauma from someone who uses a certain tone of voice. And then if you're in a relationship and your partner uses a tone of voice that's similar to that can re-trigger you and bring you back to that pain. And we're going to talk today about the nervous system and how that can really add to the conflict and general stress.
You had a significant list, right? There are so many things that can create difficulty in any relationship. And one of the things that we have in the trauma field is it's a trigger, not a threat. Overwhelm leads to kind of these 5 reactions. You know, it's the fight, flight, freeze, collapse, or submit. Another word for that is appease. Any of those triggers, they create a reaction in the nervous system. And these 4 or 5 responses that we'll see that really aren't of the person's volition. It isn't their choice to have the tone, to say the mean thing, to roll their eyes, to turn away, to not be able to talk about it. Like that isn't the choice that many people are making. I think the nervous system is making it for them. We need to work with the nervous system very quickly and sort of acknowledge it and say, hey, I get it. You know, we felt triggered by that tone, by, you know, the rolling the eyes, by the walking away. But it's not actually a threat. We're not actually in danger. We're not actually, our perception maybe that we're feeling dismissed or misunderstood or devalued. But, you know, it was a tone. It was a look. It was, you know, a moving away that maybe was a part of their own nervous system reactions, that maybe this was just a trigger, but it isn't really a threat. It's something that can help us slow things down and actually work through whatever is going on.
So I can see somebody in that situation, and having worked with someone like you to understand that, they might take a pause and say, okay, this might feel like a threat. It might feel like I'm in a threatening situation, but really I'm triggered. My nervous system is triggered and so forth. And that can kind of just de-escalate, bring you down a few notches. So yeah, I love that. When I work with my clients, one thing that is also really helpful is to identify that this is even happening, that that their nervous system is triggered. And with my background in mindfulness is to turn to the body and notice, like, am I feeling a significant strain in my abdomen, for example? That's a really good indication that your nervous system did get triggered and you feel like you're in this threat, or maybe you might feel a little bit more in your chest. Your breathing might change a little bit. Checking in with your thinking, your thoughts usually shift when you are in this triggered situation. It can trigger you into anger. It can trigger you into fear. You know, what are these thoughts and emotions can be a real indicator. Take that pause. Okay, yes, these things are going on. I'm triggered, but it's not a threat.
Even though it feels threatening, it's not an actual threat. Anything that can take it a few notches down. There's another saying that's linked to neuroscience and also to mindfulness studies is say, name it to tame it. We can do these scans, right? These fMRI studies that show where the oxygenation, where the blood flow is, where the electrical activity is in the brain when someone feels threatened. And it's in the amygdala. As soon as we can name it, oh, I'm feeling threatened because he used that tone. Oh, I think I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm actually really tired and didn't get good sleep last night. That name it to tame it, like you will see in the brain, the amygdala, that fear center that was lighting up like Times Square is now back in analog mode, is back, to quiet and calm. I mean, it's going to show up first as a bodily sensation. So the more that we can turn our attention there, that's going to help. And then look to those thoughts that are creating meaning of those bodily sensations.
And I think for the average person, someone maybe who hasn't been in therapy or been in coaching or done some of this work, the way it might be experienced is just use the word overwhelm or out of control, just like this spinning, and that name it to tame it. I call it the practice of noting, that comes from the mindfulness practice or labeling. It does. It's like half the battle is knowing what's happening, right? You're just in this space where you don't know. But then when you can name the sensation in your body and name, okay, my nervous system is triggered, I'm in fight or flight. You might even be able to name what you went into specifically, or naming what those emotions are. Looking at those deeper emotions is like, oh, really what's going on is I feel just unheard. And that's what this is about. And that's naming that emotion. So Stacy has this tool called the fire drill. Is this something that you created or that you found somewhere?
I created it by integrating different strategies, different tools that I've learned. Like for one of the things that I integrated was this HALT acronym, and I did not create that. There are two ways we can use this fire drill. One is in the event of smoke, as I say, and the other is in the event of the raging inferno. But the whole idea is to have a plan, like schools, hospitals, any large organization, and hopefully homes, right? I remember growing up in a home where we had this idea that if there were a fire, we know exactly what we need to do. It's planned ahead of time because, again, when there's a fire, we don't want to be thinking, what do I do? Because, again, it's going to be a very overwhelming situation. And the planning, the coordination, the insight, the projecting into the future is no longer going to be online in the face of that overwhelm. We have this prefrontal cortex that is wonderful at analyzing and strategizing and executing, except it tends to go offline, right? We call it flip the lid when we're in the face of something very scary, very overwhelming. If we do have a plan that we all have agreed to, that we all know, and that we've practiced, this is why schools, hospitals, large organizations will practice a fire drill. They're not just handing out the statement, saying in the event of fire, do this. We're practicing it to create this felt sense, this deep knowing of what we do. So again, when I share the fire drill, it is with this idea that it is a practice. And so to talk to your family members, your loved ones, the people that you're in the closest relationship with, hey, can we have an agreement that when things start to get heated, right, or we're in a total overwhelmed situation, this is what we're going to do? Because we need that buy-in first. If you're trying to describe it in the heat of the moment, it's not going to work, right? We're already, probably everyone in that scenario is probably already flipped, right? Or their prefrontal cortex is offline. But if we have this agreement ahead of time and we practiced it, very likely that we can execute it. In the event of smoke, right? That's again the earliest signs that the nervous system is heating up or getting overwhelmed. We want to take action. Let's try and catch it really early. At the first moment that we notice a whiff of smoke, we're going to be thinking, HALTS, right? HALTS is the acronym that stands for hungry, anxious or angry, lonely or unsupported, tired and sick. If you're noticing that you're starting to feel irritable, starting to feel a little overwhelmed, and again, like you said, the clenching in your stomach, the constriction in your chest, the heart beating really fast, the breathing getting really shallow, the feeling of the heat rising in your neck and your face, you start to feel your hands curl into a fist. These are, again, all autonomic nervous system reactions. Again, we didn't choose to curl our hand in a fist. Our body, again, is going into that fight response. We do a quick assessment in ourselves. Am I hungry? Am I upset? Did someone have a tone, right? Am I perceiving that things aren't going well in some area? The lonely, unsupported is really around, do I need help? The tired is, it's been a long day. Maybe I need a nap. So many of us will push through sickness, whether it's like a sinus headache or a cold or a tummy ache. We'll often say, I don't have time for that.
One of the big ones is anger, noticing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry, but 9 times out of 10, this anger could be a little bit more superficial. What's deeper underneath there? Are you feeling rejected? Are you feeling betrayed? Are you feeling misunderstood? And getting into that place and being able to communicate that to your partner. And with practice, then the two partners can respond better to one another. And then bringing in that validation, talk about like de-escalating your nervous system, being able to validate yourself and validate your partner can just bring it down like 5 notches. Like, it's understandable you feel misunderstood because I'm not speaking in a way that's letting you know that I do understand what you're saying. And so maybe I need to ask more questions so I do understand better.
Anger is usually surface. That is, it's kind of a sign that something underlying, right? Something more vulnerable, something deeper is happening. And one of my favorite quotes, I heard Tara Brach say this, and she said, anger is initiatory, not transformative. So yeah, anger is there to get our attention, to say there's something else going on. Again, do that U-turn and really think, okay, I am feeling angry. I am upset. What is going on? And look for those deeper, again, I call them the more vulnerable attachment emotions around feeling unheard, feeling misunderstood, feeling rejected. You've named many of them. And find the I statement there, because it's very easy to not feel heard and then to say to your partner, you're not listening. And that, we're talking about how feeling heard is an immediate de-escalator. You want to talk about an immediate escalator. It's to essentially point the finger at the other person and say, you're not doing it right. Like, you're not listening. You didn't get it right. You didn't understand me. It changes everything when the person can say, instead of you're not listening, to say, I'm not feeling heard. I see this every time without exception in the counseling room. When someone can say, I'm not feeling heard, other person who, if they had heard, like, you're not listening, they would have come back with a defense so fast, which is, I am listening. But when the person says, I'm not feeling heard, the person leans in. Oh, what am I not hearing? How can I hear you better? What do you need to feel heard? The simple but not easy shift to go from noticing what someone's doing wrong. And again, that is the way our nervous system is wired. I call it hypervigilance, right? It's looking for something that's going wrong out there. That's how we are wired, is to notice and zone in on what's not going well outside of ourselves. And it takes a lot of conscious effort and practice to do that U-turn and ask, what am I needing? What is my experience of this moment? Oh yeah, I'm not feeling heard. I'm feeling misunderstood. I'm feeling disregarded. Finding those feeling words, saying them in I statements, being ready to reflect and validate. If you're the person who's on the receiving end of your partner saying, I'm feeling unheard, it's in that moment, just as you said, to simply reflect and validate. Oh, I hear that you're not feeling heard, and I get it. That makes sense, because I was just, looking at my phone. I was just thinking about my meeting earlier today. I wasn't fully present. So of course you wouldn't feel heard. And I'm so sorry. And I'm here for you now. I'm fully present now. I want to hear. Please, let's do that again.
Turning the focus inward. And that's where the mindfulness comes in for me, is being aware of what's going on in your inner process. And that's hard because we're wired to focus outward, right? And
Yeah.
I like to think about evolution and think
Mm-hmm.
about, thousands of years ago when you're running through the forest and there's tigers, if you were going inward and saying, "Oh, I'm experiencing some fear, let me take a look at this," you might get eaten by the tiger. You really had to be focused outward and just like focused on the tiger. And so when we get in these conflicts with our partner, we are focused on the other person. And it's so helpful to shift that toward ourselves and what we are going through, and using those I statements. I will say, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, that even with the I statements, sometimes the other person can get defensive. It can be helpful to front load some of the things that you share with your partner to help the two of you get out of what I like to call the defensive apologetic dynamic. It's like your partner says something and you feel like you either need to defend yourself or you need to take responsibility and apologize. And a lot of times in a conflict in a relationship, neither of those are necessary. You can just rise above that, front loading what you're saying and saying something like, "I'm not bringing this up because I want you to directly apologize to me right now. I'm not bringing it up because I think you need to defend yourself. I'm bringing it up because I just want you to understand and hear me." But on your fire drill page here, you also talk about how to address the fight response, how to address the freeze, flight, or collapse. I think sometimes now they're calling it the flop response. And they're also talking about the fawn response, which you were talking about earlier with being appeasing. I have to say, I'm not necessarily good at identifying which one of these I'm in. That's something that I can get better at. You say here, if you identify that you're in fight response, that doing something physical can really help, because it is a fight response. Like your body is telling you, I need to move, I need to push something. And so actually punching a bag or something could be helpful. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I've been with my husband for 30 years, and he will typically have that fight response, and I will typically have that collapse or fawn response. So when you said people get into the cycle where one is angry and the other is apologizing, if you think about it, right, the anger is the fight and the apologizing is more that fawn, that appease. And so again, it doesn't feel like an active choice when, my husband and I are in that spot where I'm like, oh, let me just appease him. It just happens where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What do you need? Like, what can I do to help? When later I'm like, wait a second, I didn't do anything wrong. Like that was, but again, it's just my reaction. And again, he's certainly not proud or happy with the way his nervous system is showing up in that fight response. And so after we looked at this and gone, like years around and around in these cycles that were not serving us, we did get a punching bag in our basement. Instead of like yelling, getting big, getting in my space, what would help you? And he was like, I think if I could just punch something. And we're like, okay, great, a punching bag. And then he said, but what would that be like for you? It's going to sound really loud, and let's just say it violent. And what's that going to be like for you? Is that going to be hard for you? Because again, I am someone who, because of my own trauma responses, my own trauma history, I do tend to like cower and collapse in the face of that big, angry energy. And I said, I think it will feel different knowing that, one, it's not directed at me, and two, that we have made this agreement, that this is the way you are metabolizing your nervous system's reaction. Again, I understand it's not a choice, but it was thoughtful for him to think, but what's it going to feel like in the moment? This was our speculation. And what I can say for sure is it does feel different. That first time that I saw, the fingers curl into their fists and saw the heat rise and the tone, and then he just, walked past me and went into the basement. It was just a feeling of relief. But if it is too hard, if it does feel too overwhelming and bad, then I can take care of myself, right? My plan in the fire drill is to take a walk. right? Your plan is to go to the basement and punch this punching bag. If you can de-escalate, great. But if you can't, that's the last line of this fire drill, is keep everyone safe, right? Have a plan that everyone understands. Like if we can't de-escalate sufficiently and we can't talk about it, because we can't, we have to be able to acknowledge that it's not a don't want to, it's not a lack of willpower or caring that would prevent someone to de-escalate and talk about it. It would really just be the nervous system's overwhelmed to such an extent that they can't. And so we want to allow for that and then let everyone do what they need to do to bring calm back into their nervous system. So again, for my husband, that would be punching the punching bag. For me, it would be taking a walk, calling a friend, a shower, right? That's all in my plan. My collapse is I am stuck. I can't leave. That's my trauma story around my childhood, right? I didn't have a choice back when I was a child. Now I'm an adult. I do. So again, my thing is to be able to leave, to not collapse, to leave, to take a walk, not feeling isolated or alone, calling a friend. Before we had this agreement, my husband would basically give me the message, no, you can't leave. You can't leave until we work this out.
And the nervous system, compared to the mind, the brain, the nervous system is much less complex and actually can respond well to something simple. Affirmations about safety can be so helpful. So simply taking a pause and saying to yourself, I'm safe to express myself, talking about that fawning or that collapsing, to help me, to calm that part of the nervous system that might be triggered because you are kind of closing in and not feeling safe enough to be assertive. So that affirmation of I am safe to express myself, or the other affirmations of safety. I'm safe in my body. I'm safe to experience my emotions. I'm safe in my home. I'm safe in this relationship. These affirmations about safety can really soothe your nervous system. And like you've been saying, Stacey, we flip a lid, our prefrontal cortex goes offline, and you really can't work something out that's high level with your partner if your prefrontal cortex is not working. So it really is important to de-escalate yourself. And I know I said this earlier, but as far as the validation, yes, it's so nice to have your partner be trained, learn how to validate you, to have that type of communication, but also validating yourself and just taking that pause, even as simply as saying, it's understandable I'm upset by this because of my past trauma. I mean, you could simply say that, or it could be something more in the now. It's understandable I'm upset because felt hurtful what was said. So you had mentioned, Stacey, about taking this pause, this break, versus somebody, wanting to work it out right now. I find the couples that I work with, there's always one person that wants to work it out right then in the moment, and then the other person wants to take a pause. I am a fan of taking a pause. So the person who's not comfortable with that, learning to become more comfortable with it, because they can use that time to use some of these techniques that we're talking about to de-escalate their own nervous system. But too much time can cause more pain, right? Because for that person, especially if someone in the relationship is struggling with abandonment issues, I mean, that pause, that time away can cause so much pain. So I try to get the couples to work toward being able to take no more than 30 minutes, like maybe 15, maybe 30, but no more than 30 minutes to come back and reconvene. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that, of this question, like, is it okay to take a pause and take a break?
It depends, because I have some clients who say it's very likely that I'm not going to feel regulated, resourced sufficiently to have this big talk for 24 hours after an explosion. As long as there's an agreement that seems realistic to both parties, you have the more anxious attachment who's like, no, we need to settle this now. And then you have the other one who's like, no, I need space. We want to just have the agreement be between them. By the time they get to me in couples counseling, this is such a persistent, chronic cycle of that person who's the anxious attachment, right, or has the abandonment issues, who's like, but they never return, right? Or we never talk about it. Again, they return physically in body, right? But they never get closure. They never get a good repair around that rupture that happened. And so, yes, we have to make that so clear to the person who is the more likely to withdraw, how damaging that is to the person to never feel fully heard, fully seen, fully understood, fully tended to in that rupture. We encourage, right, like sooner rather than later. But again, we just make sure that it's realistic for both partners. Even that one who would love to just get the resolution, within 15 minutes, knows their partner and knows that they really are doing their best, and they would come back if they could and resolve it more quickly. And if it takes 24 hours, they would prefer that rather than, like it never gets resolved.
Yeah. And the separation, when the two people decide to go and have some alone time, it can be so helpful for them to let each other know, I value you, I care about you, I just need this time to look inward and become more self-aware of my process through this and de-escalate my nervous system. Well, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you. I feel like we could talk about so much more, but our time is limited. But I would love to hear, Stacey, how the listeners can find you and more about your private practice.
So I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor in Asheville, but because of state licensure laws, that means I can work with people anywhere in the state of North Carolina virtually online, and also have my office in downtown Asheville in order to meet people in person if that's what they prefer. I also have an online program called Repair Your Relationship Online. So you can find me at Asheville Family Counseling, and that's Asheville Family Counseling, oneword.com. And then if you're more interested in an online program, kind of a do-it-yourself, self-paced study, do-it-yourself, you could do it with your partner, with your teens. We're finding that so many of my clients are working through this program with their teen children, with your young adult children. They're working through the program together to, again, learn these new ways of relating to each other, of using these I statements, of creating their fire drill. And so I'm really excited to offer that as well. And people can find that at repairyourrelationshiponline.com.
I'll have both of those websites linked live in the show notes, as well as a link to this handout that we've been talking about, the fire drill. So that'll all be there. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Oh, yeah, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
The Aware Mind podcast is a TSD Mindfulness production. Please check out our show notes for upcoming events and links to additional resources. Please visit our website at tsdmind.org. That is T as in tame, S as in soothe, D as in dwell, mind as in mindfulness.org. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at TSD_mindfulness.